Well, I'm so excited to welcome you along to another themed week here on Property Tribes. We are calling it Profitable Property Secrets Week, and it's based on this updated version of a book by my guest and co-presenter Steve Bolton, founder of Platinum Property Partners and, of course, prolific HMO landlord. And Steve, so excited about this week. I know we're going to cover a lot of ground because we've actually got 7 instalments running through till Sunday, not just 5, the usual amount. I guess a good place to start and frame this this whole week is to talk a little bit about your personal property journey.
Sure, wonderful. Should we see how many more P's we can get into this interview? It's like a bit of a mouthful. Profitable property secrets. My personal journey, left school at 16 with no qualifications. Started my first business in my mid-20s. On paper, was a millionaire by the time my early 30s, and then lost it all. And it was my house that saved me from going bankrupt. And I had equity, just lived in it, did it up. So that was like a real difficult period of my life. I call it the best, worst experience of my life. But property saved me from going bankrupt, so that was a kind of a key lesson. And then I discovered a concept that I call today standing on the shoulders of giants, finding people that have been there and done it and learning from them to achieve success. So decided I wanted to go into property. I spent two years researching the market, one on every course, read every book. There weren't, unfortunately, forums around like Property Tribes back in the day, but I devoured a load of knowledge and did a lot of research, travelled all over the world. Bought my first house, which I decided to go into HMOs, houses in multiple occupation, multiple young working professional people living together, not students, not sort of benefit tenants, but young working professional people working and living in the same sort of location. Bought my first house in 2004. By 2007, I bought 20. And created a level of financial independence and a regular income that I could live off without actually having to trade my time for money. Decided to franchise that business also in 2007, and it's since become the fastest growing premium franchise in UK history. We've been going 12 years, I think, nearly 13 years now. 370 odd franchise partners investing in 200 town, cities, locations, primarily in England. A few in Wales, one in Scotland, but mainly an England-based strategy. We now have, through the network, our partners own those houses, and it's a sort of a partnership between us. We have over 7,000 tenants, around about 7,000 tenants living in the properties, and over 1,100 houses that are rented in this way. So it's been a journey, typical kind of roller coaster ride, but learnt a lot on the way, and very passionate about sharing that knowledge and helping people avoid the mistakes that either means you go out of business or you buy the wrong house in the wrong location, and that's essentially what we do as PPP.
Absolutely, and that's really the theme of this week, isn't it? Because we're going to look at the mistakes that buy-to-let investors typically make. I think, one of my favourite sayings is by Cheryl Cole. She said, "I've learnt so much from my mistakes, I'm thinking of making some more," which I do like that because it is important to learn from mistakes. But in property, if you make mistakes, it can actually be very expensive, very, very stressful, and you can potentially lose everything. So the whole point of this week really is to make your hindsight our community's foresight, so they can kind of avoid the pitfalls.
Sure, yeah, absolutely, and I think we can all learn from each other, so I've got experience, but other people will have their own experience, and I think it's quite interesting on Property Tribes, and some people say, the best way to learn is on your own and do it yourself, and don't read books or don't get a mentor or a course or whatever, and there's no right or wrong way. I just know from my own experience that because property is such a high impact investment, if it goes right or wrong, the upside is amazing, but the downside can be horrific.
Yeah.
And so it's not like you're trying to learn. If you're buying a house worth £300,000 and you're tied into a mortgage for the long term, and you get a wrong house, wrong location, wrong mortgage, whatever, you can't get tenants there, builders overrun, the costs are tens or hundreds of thousands of pounds. And so for me, when faced with a choice, that's why I spent 2 years doing research before I actually bought my first house.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And prevention is always, better, less financial, cost and less stress than trying to cure something once it's gone wrong. So we really want this whole week to be about getting you, the viewers, into prevention mode. And I think a good place to start, Steve, is your number one mistake was not adopting the right strategy. And I think we can't talk about this enough, because property is not a case of one size fits all. It's going to be very bespoke to the individual, their starting position in terms of finances, how much time they have to dedicate to it, their attitude to risk, the kind of support network they have around them. What's your advice to somebody when they're thinking, I'm going to get started, I'm a bit overwhelmed, do I go for an HMO straight off the bat? What would you say to that?
I think that strategy always trumps tactics, and I think I don't want it to sound like business speak. No qualifications, didn't go to university, haven't got an MBA, but actually I have read a lot of books and been on a lot of courses. And strategy is essentially, where are you trying to get to? What is your longer term goal? What are you trying to do? Whereas tactics is, what house do I buy? Do I do HMOs? What builder do I get? Very sort of more granular, and so. It's kind of almost like being in an aeroplane. You can be an aeroplane on the runway looking at the ground. You get a very limited, small view. That's the kind of tactical. Or you can be at 37,000 feet looking down with a much broader view. So I really encourage people to take that broad view. Why are you actually trying to do this in the first place? So when it comes to your strategy, is it about income? Is it actually you need additional income? Is it about making capital gains? Buying things, maybe selling them at a profit and generating lump sums of cash? Or is it pension? Because really, if you boil money down to a fundamental level, there's three kind of key skills to it. You can make more, you can spend less, and you can keep more of what you earn. Okay, so I think that's like a strategically, what do you want as an individual? What are your personal financial goals before you even get into property? What are your goals? And most people spend more time planning their summer holidays than they do the rest of their life, right? So actually having that clarity about where you want to get to. The number of people that I meet that just don't have that clarity, they've sort of gone through life from one job to another job, or buying a house here and then one in Newcastle and one in Manchester, without that strategic kind of thinking. So be clear on your personal goals and financial objectives, and then look at the different types of strategies that there are when it comes to investing in property. And we can talk more about those if you want to.
Well, we will do throughout the week. I think also you're a big advocate of actually sitting down and creating a business plan as well. And I think certainly, with all the tax changes and the finance changes that we've had in the last 3 to 4 years, it would actually be a really positive thing to go and sit with your tax advisor and with your mortgage broker when you create that plan.
Yeah, it would, but I think the caution is that they have if you imagine a successful business and a successful financial plan as like a pie or a cake, an accountant will have one slice, one kind of view of it.
Yeah.
Okay, a lawyer will have another kind of view of it, and actually the person who's responsible for kind of creating the whole cake, or at least having a vision of what the whole thing is you. It's the business owner, it's the property investor, and so. There's people that have got specialties like mortgage brokers, but what we normally call it's a commercial view. The commercial view is the holistic view. What are my personal goals? What's the right strategy? Is it buying stuff, doing it up, selling it? Is it being a property developer? Is it doing buy to let on a single occupancy basis? Is it student letting? Is it HMOs to working professional people? Is it fly to let, where you've got holiday homes, Airbnb? Is it commercial property? And so there's loads and loads of different strategies. If people are new on limited funding, then I would very much recommend they start in residential. Even if you've got good funding but you haven't done property as a professional investor, and got a lot of experience, then I wouldn't necessarily go into commercial. That's a sort of that's like the PhD. Residential is the place to cut your teeth and to learn. And really think about your goals. For most people, I recommend an income-based strategy.
Yep.
Okay, because if you're a developer or you're a trader and you're buying and selling, few phrases that are quite commonly used. One is the profit is in the buying. Okay, to a degree. Yeah, you want to buy at the best possible price, but actually if you're not going to sell, then I've paid above market value for some of the properties that I own, some of the residential properties, because they give off an income. So it's like if I have to pay 10 or 20,000 pound more to get 8 bedrooms rather than 6, rather than the price of paying, I'll pay that extra 20,000 because that's going to make me another 10,000 pound a year in rent. So in 2 years I've got that extra that I paid back. So profit's not always in the buying. So being clear on the strategy, my recommendation for most people is, successful businesses are profitable and sustainable. So the danger of buying and selling, who are you going to sell to? At what price? What if the market drops? What if you can't sell it? You've got the carry cost. Whereas if you've got a house that's generating 10% yield, 12% yield, 8% yield, that essentially means if you're borrowing money at 3 or 4%, you're making a positive cash flow every month. And so my houses, I bought quite a few in 2004 to 2007, and people could look at it and say, why did you buy then? It was a stupid time to buy. The market was near its peak. And yeah, those houses went down by 10 or 15%, but they were all cash positive, because I took a long-term view, getting 300% more rent than most buy-to-let investors. So if you want to minimise risk and maximise returns, multiple occupancy residential property, taking a long-term view, for me is a winning strategy.
No, I totally agree. I think I would just add a caveat to that perhaps when people are starting out, to me, an HMO is the kind of to use a metaphor, it's like the Ferrari of the buy-to-let world, whereas perhaps people need to start out in a Ford Fiesta or something, would you say?
Sure. Yeah, I think all of this is done with the caveat that anybody listening is going to have their own personal circumstances that are unique to them. They might be working, they might have a lot of cash, they might have no cash, they might not even own their first, they might be thinking about property for the first time, not even own their own home. So for me, for most people, if you're on limited amount of money and you don't have a property at one end of the spectrum, the first thing to do is get on the property ladder. That's kind of sensible advice, but even then, get on the property ladder and try and buy something to live in that you don't have to sell when you move out. Okay, so I always sort of say to people, the best piece of advice I can get anybody that's starting out on their investing journey in property is just think about the places that you buy, or your family buy, or your kids buy things that actually you'll be able to rent and at least cover the costs, so that long term you can keep that first one, build up a deposit, or borrow some money from that first on the next house that you buy, or the next flat that you buy. The other one's going to tick up in value. For most people, they might move 3, 4, 5, 6 times in their life, in terms of, at the end you get to pension age, you've got 3, 4, 5, 6 properties. So if you're starting out, start with your own home. If you've got your own home already and you're starting out in property investing, then I think, depending on the amount of money, if you've got less than £300,000, the strategy I'm talking about is difficult to make work. So thinking about other strategies that might build up your capital might be more suitable for people with a lower level of funding.
Okay, that's brilliant. So we'll be talking more to Steve throughout the week, and we are calling this Profitable Property Secrets Week. So stay tuned, a lot more to come. And tomorrow we're going to be talking about mitigating risk in property. So do join us tomorrow as our Profitable Property Secrets Week continues.